They thought kicking Karoline out of their hotel would stroke their anti-Trump egoistic feelings, but it backfired at them badly. The Palisade Hotel stood like a glass monolith on the edge of Palm Beach, Florida, its sleek lines and mirrored windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. It was the kind of place where valets wore pressed white gloves, and the lobby smelled faintly of lavender and money. On March 27, 2025, Karoline Leavitt pulled into the curved driveway in a rented Toyota Corolla, its paint chipped from a year of East Coast winters. The engine sputtered as she shifted into park, and she stepped out, smoothing the wrinkles from her faded black blazer. Her sneakers were scuffed, her hair tied back in a messy bun, no makeup, no jewelry, just a woman who looked like she'd spent the day chasing deadlines, not headlines. Karoline wasn't here on a whim. She'd booked a room 2 weeks earlier for a quick overnight stay before a meeting in Miami. At 27, she'd already made a name for herself as a sharp-tongued political operative, a former Trump campaign spokesperson, who'd traded press briefings for a quieter life consulting behind the scenes. But the Palisade didn't know that. To them, she was just another face, and not one that screamed VIP. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of marble and crystal, chandeliers dripping from the ceiling like frozen rain. Soft classical music hummed through hidden speakers. 3 staff members stood behind the polished check-in desk. A manager in a tailored suit, a clerk tapping at a tablet, and a concierge adjusting his tie. They saw her enter, sneakers squeaking faintly on the floor. But no one. Karoline approached the desk, her canvas tote slung over one shoulder, and offered a tired smile. "Hi, I'm checking in. Reservation under Leavitt," she said, voice steady but soft. The clerk glanced up, her eyes flicking over Karoline's outfit. "Leavitt, you said?" She tapped the screen, paused, then frowned. "I'm not seeing it. Did you book through a third party?" "No, directly on your site," Karoline replied, pulling out her phone to show the confirmation email. "Here's the number." Paley, the manager, a man in his late 40s with slick back hair and a name tag reading Richard, stepped forward. He didn't look at the phone. "Ma'am, we're fully booked tonight. There's a conference in town. Big event. If there's a glitch in the system, I apologize, but I don't have a room for you." Karoline blinked. "I booked this 2 weeks ago. It's prepaid. You're saying you don't honor reservations?" Richard's smile was thin, practiced. "We honor what we can accommodate. Sometimes oversights happen. I can refund you, or you can try the Comfort Inn down the road. They might have something." The clerk smirked faintly, turning back to her tablet. The concierge adjusted his tie again, avoiding eye contact. Karoline stood there, feeling the weight of their dismissal settle like humidity on her skin. She wasn't loud or flashy, she never had been, but she wasn't invisible either. Not to herself, at least. "I'd like to speak to someone who can fix this," she said, her tone firming. Richard sighed, checking his watch. "Ma'am, I'm the manager on duty. There's nothing I can do. We're at capacity. Please, let's not make this difficult." The word "ma'am" landed like a slap. Polite, on the surface, but dripping with condescension. Karoline opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. She'd spent years in rooms with people who hutter at her, from campaign trail skeptics to cable news pundits. This wasn't new, but it still stung. "Fine," she said, voice tight. "Refund me. I'll figure it out." Richard nodded to the clerk, who processed the refund with exaggerated slowness. Karoline took her phone back, turned, and walked out, her sneakers echoing in the silent lobby. Outside, she slid into the Corolla, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She didn't cry, she wasn't the type, but something heavy lodged in her chest. As she drove away, careful not to scrape the pristine curb. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching. Not in the lobby, but from a black SUV parked across the street. Paul, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, had been her occasional driver during the campaign years. He wasn't assigned to her anymore, but he'd been in Palm Beach on a personal errand and spotted her car by chance. He saw the way she walked out, head high, but shoulders tight, and made a call. "Boss," Paul said, into his phone. Voice low, "You're not gonna believe this. They just kicked Karoline out of the Palisade. Didn't even blink." On the other end, Donald Trump leaned back in a leather chair at Mar-a-Lago, 15 miles up the coast. It was late afternoon, and he'd been skimming briefing notes for a potential 2028 run, unofficial of course, but the gears were turning. At 78, he moved slower than he once did, but his mind was still a steel trap. He set the papers down, frowning. Kicked her out? Trump's voice crackled through the line. Karoline? My Karoline? The one who handled those vultures in the press like a champ? Yes, sir, Paul said. Looked like they didn't even give her a chance. She had a reservation. I saw her show him something on her phone. Trump's eyes narrowed. They got no idea who she is, do they? Doesn't seem like it, Paul replied. Treated her like she was nobody. There was a pause, the kind that anyone who'd worked with Trump knew meant trouble. He didn't shout, not yet, he just tapped a gold pen against the desk. Once, twice. All right, he said finally. I'll handle it. You keep an eye on her. Make sure she's okay. She's family. Paul nodded, though Trump couldn't see it. Yes, sir. Karoline didn't grow up with silver spoons or private jets. She was born in Hampstead, New Hampshire, in a modest split-level house where the driveway always needed repaving. Her dad ran a small HVAC business. Her mom taught third grade. They weren't poor, but they weren't flush either. Every vacation was a road trip, every Christmas budgeted. Karoline was the middle kid, sandwiched between an older brother who played football and a younger sister who sang in the church choir. She learned early how to read people who'd share a snack, who'd snub you for wearing last year's jacket. By 15, she was working weekends at a local coffee shop, memorizing orders and dodging rude customers with a smile. It was there she honed the quick wit that later caught Trump's eye. She put herself through Holy Cross with a mix of scholarships and loans, majoring in political science, then landed a gig as a congressional aide before joining the 2020 campaign. Trump liked her because she didn't flinch on camera or off. She'd face down screaming reporters with the same calm she used on entitled latte drinkers back home. Even after leaving the campaign in 2022, she kept a low profile. No designer labels, no Instagram flexing, just a rented apartment in DC. And a beat-up car she refused to replace. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But that didn't mean she liked being invisible. That night, after the Palisade fiasco, Karoline checked into a budget motel off I-95. The rooms smelled like bleach and stale cigarettes. But the clerk had been kind, even slipping her an extra pillow. She sat on the lumpy bed, scrolling X on her phone, debating whether to post about the hotel. Nah, she thought, not worth the energy. She texted her sister instead. Rough day. Tell you later. Then she showered, changed into an old campaign t-shirt, and tried to sleep. Meanwhile, at Mar-a-Lago, Trump wasn't sleeping. He sat in his private study, a gilded room with red velvet curtains and a portrait of himself above the fireplace. The Palisade wasn't just any hotel, it was part of a luxury chain he'd once considered buying back in the 90s. He knew the owner, Victor Grayson, a wiry billionaire who'd made his fortune in real estate and hospitality. They weren't close, but they'd golfed together a few times. Trump didn't care. Loyalty mattered more than old handshake. He dialed Grayson's personal line. It was 9:47 p.m. late, but Trump never cared about clocks. Victor, he said when the man picked up, voice groggy. It's Donald, we've got a problem. Donald? Grayson muttered, waking up fast. What's going on? Your people at the Palisade just threw out one of my best, Trump said, leaning forward. Karoline Leavitt. Smartest kid I ever had on my team. They treated her like trash. Sent her packing because she didn't look the part. You believe that? Grayson hesitated. I'll look into it. That's not how we run things. Doesn't matter how you run it, Trump snapped. It's how it happened. She had a reservation, paid for it, and they told her to hit the road. You know who she is? She's not some nobody. She's mine. Grayson cleared his throat. I'll call the GM right now. Get it sorted. No, Trump cut in. You don't get it sorted. I'm shutting it down. A beat of silence. Shutting what down? The Palisade, Trump said, like it was obvious. Your little glass palace. You don't disrespect my people and keep the lights on. Grayson laughed nervously. Donald. Come on, it's a mistake. I'll fire whoever did it. Too late, Trump said. I'm making calls. You'll see. He hung up before Grayson could protest. Then he dialed another number. Mike Rollins, a longtime fixer who'd handled everything from campaign logistics to quiet real estate deals. Mike, Trump said when Rollins answered. Palisade Hotel in Palm Beach. They crossed me. I want it gone. Business dried up. Doors locked. You know who to call. Rollins didn't flinch. On it, sir. How fast? Tomorrow, Trump said. Make it loud. Below is an expanded version of the excerpt, stretched to approximately 3,000 words by adding detailed descriptions, internal monologues, additional character interactions, and a deeper exploration of the setting and consequences. The core narrative remains intact, but it's enriched with texture and tension to flesh out the story. By 7 a.m. the next morning, the Palisade Hotel was no longer the gleaming beacon of luxury it had been just 12 hours prior. The glass facade, usually a pristine mirror reflecting the golden hues of the Palm Beach sunrise, seemed dulled under a thin layer of morning dew, as if the building itself sensed the trouble brewing within. Inside, the lobby, normally a symphony of soft murmurs, clinking coffee cups, and the faint hum of wealth, was buzzing, but not with the usual parade of guests in tailored suits and designer sunglasses. This was a different kind of energy, frantic, jagged, like static crackling through a broken radio. Richard Delaney, the manager, arrived at 6:55 a.m., pulling his silver Lexus into the staff lot with the precision of a man who'd parked in the same spot for 8 years. He was 48, with slicked-back salt and pepper hair and a perpetual squint from too many years staring at spreadsheets under fluorescent lights. He'd always prided himself on running a tight ship. The Palisade wasn't just a hotel, it was a machine, every cog polished and spinning in sync. But as he stepped out, briefcase in hand, he noticed something off. The valets weren't at their posts, and a cluster of bellhops stood near the service entrance, whispering and glancing at their phones. He frowned, adjusting his tie, a silk number he'd bought on sale at Neiman Marcus, and strode toward the front doors. The moment he entered, the chaos hit him like a wave. The receptionist, a 23-year-old named Mia with a sharp bob and a knack for calming irate guests, was hunched at her desk. Phone pressed to her ear, her free hand scrolling through an inbox that looked like a war zone. Emails piled up faster than she could read them. Subject lines screaming cancellation request. Urgent, account review, immediate attention required. Richard dropped his briefcase on the marble counter with a thud, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. What the hell's going on? He demanded, voice sharp but unsteady. Mia looked up, eyes wide, her usual composure fraying at the edges. I don't even know where to start. 2 of our biggest corporate clients, Marwood Financial and Triton Events, canceled their bookings overnight. Full refunds, no explanation beyond reputational concerns. Then there's this. She swiveled her tablet toward him, showing an email from Kessler & Dunn, a law firm with deep ties to South Florida's elite. The message was curt, almost surgical. We're reevaluating our vendor relationships due to recent developments. Expect further correspondence. Richard's stomach dropped. Kessler & Dunn leased 6 suites annually for their partners. 6 figures worth of business, gone with a single sentence. He snatched the tablet, scrolling through the inbox himself. More cancellations, a tech startup's retreat, a wedding party, even a handful of regulars who'd been coming since the hotel opened in 2012. His phone buzzed in his pocket once, twice, then incessantly. He pulled it out, a supplier asking about a delayed payment, then a text from a reporter at the Palm Beach Post. Heard, there's trouble at the Palisade, care to comment? He silenced it, hands trembling slightly. Get Grayson on the line, he barked at Mia, referring to Victor Grayson, the hotel's owner. Now, she nodded, fumbling with the phone. But before she could dial, the front doors slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. The air shifted, thicker, heavier, like the prelude to a storm. Richard turned, and his heart stopped. A black Cadillac Escalade idled in the driveway, its tinted windows glinting like obsidian. The driver's door opened, and Mike Rollins stepped out, broad-shouldered, graying at the temples, a man who moved like he'd seen too many backroom deals to count. He didn't approach. He just leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching. Then the passenger door opened, and out stepped Donald Trump. The president was unmistakable, even at 78. His hair, a defiant swoop of blonde orange, caught the morning breeze as he adjusted the lapels of a navy suit, the kind he donned on countless podiums, A red tie hung bold against his white shirt. The silent declaration of presence. He carried no briefcase, no entourage, just himself, striding toward the entrance with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd never doubted his own gravity. The valets, who'd finally emerged from their huddle, froze mid-step. A guest in the lobby, a middle-aged woman in yoga pants clutching a latte, gasped audibly, fumbling for her phone. Richard hurried forward, his polished loafers clicking on the marble, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air-conditioned chill. He forced a smile, the kind he'd perfected for VIPs. Though it wobbled at the edges. "Mr. President," he stammered, extending a hand. "Sir, what an honor to have you here." "Save it," Trump said, raising a palm with the authority of a traffic cop. His voice was gravelly, carrying that familiar New York cadence that could fill a room without effort. He didn't take Richard's hand, he just stood there, blue eyes narrowing as he scanned the lobby. The staff, Mia, the concierge adjusting his tie for the third time that morning, a housekeeper pushing a cart froze like deer in headlights. The classical music, still tinkling faintly from the speakers, felt absurdly out of place. "You know why I'm here?" Trump asked, locking eyes with Richard. Richard blinked, his mind racing. He'd heard rumors, whispers from a night shift clerk, about a woman getting turned away yesterday, but nothing concrete. Karoline Leavitt," Trump said, his voice booming now, bouncing off the high ceilings. "Yesterday, you kicked her out. My Karoline teen, best press secretary I ever had, tough than nails, smarter than half the clowns in Washington. You looked at her sneakers and said no room. That ring a bell?" Richard's face drained of color, the memory crashing into him like a rogue wave. The woman in the faded blazer, the beat-up Corolla, the quiet insistence about a reservation. He'd dismissed her. Oversight. He'd called it in his head, a polite way of saying she didn't fit the Palisades clientele. He'd assumed she was a budget traveler, a third-party booking glitch, someone who'd stumble into the Comfort Inn and forget about it. He hadn't even checked her name properly. "Sir," he said, voice cracking, "I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Trump interrupted, stepping closer, until Richard could smell the faint citrus of his cologne. "You don't need to know who she is to treat her like a human being. You don't need a resume to see someone's worth. But you didn't. You sized her up, sneakers, cheap car, and you said, 'Not here.' Wrong move, pal. So now you're done." Richard's mouth opened, then closed, a fish gasping on dry land. "Done?" he echoed, the word tasting like ash. "Your hotel," Trump said, gesturing around with a sweep of his arm that took in the chandeliers, the plush velvet chairs, the gleaming counter. "It's over. I've got tune pulling strings. Clients, vendors, press. You think those cancellations this morning were a coincidence? That's me, warming up. By next week you'll be lucky to sell a sandwich in this place." Richard's knees wobbled, but he steadied himself against the counter. His mind spun. Marwood, Triton, Kessler. All gone in hours. He'd heard Trump could move mountains when he was aide. But this was a demolition. He glanced at Mia, who'd shrunk behind the desk, her tablet abandoned. The clerk from yesterday. Jenny, a part-time with a habit of smirking at guests she deemed beneath her. Peeked out, eyes wide with terror. Trump turned to her, his gaze like a spotlight. Were you here?" Jenny nodded, her ponytail bobbing like a nervous metronome. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Barely audible. "You see her get brushed off?" he asked, stepping toward her. The distance between them shrank, and she clutched the edge of the desk as if it might save her. "I didn't think she stammered, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Exactly," Trump cut in, pointing a finger. "You didn't think, you looked at her and saw nothing worth your time. Now you're all out of a job." He didn't wait for her response. He turned on his heel, suit jacket swishing, and strode back toward the doors. Richard lunged after him, desperation clawing at his throat. "Mr. President, please, let me fix this. I'll call her. Apologize, compa sweet." Trump didn't break stride. "Too late," he called over his shoulder. "You had your shot." The doors hissed open, and he was gone, Rawlings falling into step behind him as they climbed into the Escalade. The engine roared to life, and the car peeled out, leaving a faint screech of rubber on asphalt. The lobby stayed silent for a full 10 seconds, the staff too stunned to move. Then Mia's phone rang, a shrill, insistent sound that snapped them back to reality. She answered, her voice shaking. Palisade Hotel, how may I? Yes, I understand. I'll process the refund. Richard sank into a chair, staring at the spot where Trump had stood. His tie felt like a noose. By noon the story had exploded. X lit up with posts. Trump just torched the Palisade Hotel over a snubbed staffer. Savage. Local news vans parked across the street, cameras trained on the entrance. Fox ran a segment titled "Trump Shuts Down Hotel After Staff Snub Ex-Spokeswoman," complete with a clip of him at Mar-a-Lago, mid-rant. They messed with the wrong person. Karoline's tougher than all of them combined. Loyal, brilliant. You don't treat loyalty like that, not in my world. They're finished. The anchor nodded gravely, as if a national crisis had unfolded. Victor Grayson, holed up in his Miami penthouse, called Trump 3 times, each plea more frantic than the last. "Donald, this is insane. Let me make it right. I'll fire the whole staff if you want." Voicemail. "I'm begging you. Call me back." Nothing. Grayson paced his balcony, the Atlantic glittering below, his empire cracking at the seams. Karoline Leavitt woke at 8:30 in her motel room, off I-95, the thin curtains doing little to block the sun. The bed creaked as she sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her phone glowed with notifications. Missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, texts from her sister. "Turn on the TV now." She fumbled for the remote, flipping to CNN, then Fox, where Trump's voice blared, "Karoline's family. You don't mess with family." She froze. Coffee cup halfway to her lips. The motel's ancient TV flickered, but the image was clear. Trump, red-faced and gesturing, the Palisades logo flashing in the corner. Her phone buzzed again. Her sister. This time a call. "Karoline, what the hell?" Her sister's voice burst through. "Trump's shutting down a hotel for you?" "I didn't," Karoline started, then stopped. Paul. It had to be Paul, the driver who'd spotted her yesterday. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't wanted the fuss, but Trump, he didn't do subtle. "I didn't ask for this," she finished, half laughing, half dazed. Her phone buzzed again, his number this time, the one she hadn't used since 2022. She answered, heart thumping. "Karoline," Trump said, his tone softer now, almost paternal. "You okay?" "Sir," she said, a laugh escaping despite herself. "You didn't have to do that." "Had to," he replied. Firm. "Nobody treats my people like garbage. You're not invisible. Not to me, not to anyone who matters. They thought they could push you around. Big mistake." She smiled, a real one, the kind that warmed her from the inside. "Thank you. Get a better car, though," he added, a grin in his voice. "That Corolla's a disgrace. Makes me look bad." She laughed outright. "Yes, sir. Good girl," he said. "Take care." The line clicked dead. She sat back, staring at the peeling wallpaper. The weight from yesterday, the sting of Richard's mayhem, the clerk's smirk, lifted, not because a hotel was crumbling, but because someone had seen her. Trump didn't just defend her. He'd made her matter in a way she hadn't expected. By the end of the week, the Palisade was a ghost town. Buckins evaporated. Conferences, honeymoons, weekend getaways, all gone. Staff were laid off in droves. Mia packed her desk into a cardboard box. Jenny cried in the break room. Grayson scrambled to sell. But buyers smelled blood in the water. No one wanted a tainted asset. The Palm Beach Post ran a front-page story. From pinnacle to pit, how one snub sank a hotel. Ex-users posted photos of the empty lot, captions like "Don't mess with Trump's crew" and "Sneakers won." Snobs